Hello and welcome to the Field Report at the Third Watch Update. I have not done very many of these reports recently, and the reason I'm doing it tonight is because of the significance of a couple events. So I put together a timeline, and I'm going to be skipping around here, but I want to explain the timeline first. Okay, the point to a timeline is to explain how somebody might predict or prophesy. Now, I'm going to tell you what, at the time of doing a news timeline, it did not make sense to me at all. Why we had such strong premonition. And I believe we have a sixth sense or even a prophetic gift if you want to crystallize it more. And there were apocalyptic signs or something that was going on last year at the same time is why I'm doing this timeline. Because last year at this time, when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Nentayahu went before the Congress regarding Iran and Israel in the United States, I want to point out that at that time, we could have never predicted what would happen a year later. That's why I'm doing this timeline, because there were things that I can go back from previous reports, and I was scrolling down my page, and I had to pick out the story that provoked me so much that I'm going to play a clip of it so that you know where I'm going with this. And there's some important things I'm going to pull together and how you could actually have maybe possibly foreseen this.
Because we know, Lord Father, that without you we cannot defeat the real invisible enemy, the one that we can't see, Lord Father. Lord, I ask you that you would heal the bodies and those who have been longing for answers, that, Lord, that they would find them today. You would edify our speech, you would edify our thoughts, that our thoughts would be bound to the cross, that our thoughts are pure, and that we honor you, Lord, in our words and our actions today. In Jesus' holy name we pray, amen. What I'm about to report to you, I'm not sure I'm even able to handle the dynamic and the repercussions. And you're going to have to look at it yourself. I caution you that I'm not responding very well with this, and not very comfortable reporting stuff that, unless I really do a little bit more homework, but it kind of fits this puzzle piece again. We've been talking about putting the puzzle pieces together. I think it's really relevant. When we saw the Arch of Baal that was erected over the week, and then another report just a day ago, it fits in exactly what the Arch of Baal would be designed to do. Because if you know the history of the Arch of Baal was erected, and then it was open season, it openly was sacrificing children at the Arch of Baal, Molech. And we've heard reports about the effigies that, I just don't even know how to word this, really, I don't. Let me get right to the report. Dr. Mount was reporting that in Arizona and in California now, they're now requiring that parents are not allowed to change their babies' diapers, and that all children are a ward of the state. Now, listen, I don't know who she is. She's a reporter at MSNBC. Her name's Melissa something. She goes, that children are a ward of the state. This is why this topic needs to be discussed, and we're going to discuss it right now. If you read the earlier post, if you read any of the posts, you have to understand what the Nephilim giants are. You got to know what the pagan rituals are. You have to know exactly what you're talking about. We're talking about a spirit of this age. We're talking about Kundalini spirit. We're calling it the serpentine spirit. You pray against it in Jesus' name. The blood shed cross was protecting you from this. If you don't really understand your authority in Jesus Christ, you have to understand He gives us the sword of the Spirit. That means the words that come from our mouth can cut like a sword. And you got to speak right into it. You got to speak against it, and it needs to flee. Ask yourself why these things purposely hide themselves for you. Why do they purposely, intentionally hide them? Because they're afraid of you. You need to understand your authority. They wouldn't be hiding in these dark caverns or wherever they hide out at, or wherever the secrets are, if they weren't afraid of what you have. You got to understand your authority in Jesus Christ.
Okay, so the point to telling you what I reported on a year ago is exactly where we're at, and it was March 12th, 2017 was Purim. And at that time, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, not at that time, but at the time of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu going before Barack Obama and Congress regarding Iran. That was a year ago, I believe. Okay, here we are a year ago. And there's a prophecy of Esther that after that 10 days, because King Haman did not do as he ended up hanging from the very gallows he created. Now, over a year ago, we were talking about Jade Helm, okay? And that was the story. So I'm covering stuff that happened a year ago and how God has reversed it. And a lot of people had what they call prophetic visions and dreams, okay? And I'm actually trying to put together this timeline because when I saw this story, I didn't know what to make of this. Is this a real story, or did he fake go into the hospital? And David Brock was one of the people behind the scenes with Barack Obama. And every one of these people are starting to go down like all of a sudden. Now, I want to make sure that I'm saying this correctly, but at that time, many people feared that the detention camps that were being opened were going to be used on Americans. But looking at what's happening now, everything switched. And this goes to the prophecy of Esther and Purim. I'm going to explain more. Let me get into some of the news. So here we are. Okay, so we're going to leave off here with Esther because there's something to what I've been talking about. And it goes back to that article, again, with Twitter. Because of that very specific, I want to say it's a prophecy fulfilled, because according to this prophecy of Esther, when Esther went before the king, the adversarial one of Haman, he actually hung from the very gallows. And I'm going to put together some things. You might have to really think about this if you really believe how prophecy works. And I'd be curious if anybody has any thoughts on this, because the very same day that David Brock has a heart attack is the 10 days after, which really leads us to this point. Now, these are the kind of stories that are coming out. These are two officers that have been charged with sexual misconduct, probably even more worse terms. So are we in apocalypse? Well, okay, listen, there have been bad things going on for a while, but are we reaching a tipping point? Because it could go one way or the other, and that goes to the people praying, interceding. And when God intercedes in behalf of his people, something else happens. I just want to check myself because I'm not quite sure about this, but the idea that a year ago this could have gone wrong and it didn't, this shows evidence of God turning things around, because the very place where they were preparing these Jade Helm exercises and looking at what they call false flags, it would be a cause for concern. So look at these images here. Now, this story comes from India, and this is, I don't know the name for it, but this is a genetic, obviously malformation, but they're comparing this baby, this woman actually had this baby, to an Indian Hindu god. Okay, so now on to the next story. This is also big news. David Rockefeller has passed away. Okay, so these are pretty real interesting moments because they're happening. Listen, it happens the day of what the prophecy would be fulfilled. And then, of course, a lot of people are being censored. So this could be actually useful information. But the reason I'm putting together this timeline is to say that because what happened last year and what happened this year is very significant. That David Rockefeller dies on the solstice festival of, they celebrate the solstice festival. And I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes when the enemy has a plan, well, God has a plan too. It says they say adversary, you pray for your adversary. And the idea, some of these things all happen at the same, literally in the same time this year than it did last year, is why I decided to do this timeline. Because there is something significant about the prophecy of Esther, and I'm going to put some information together. I can honestly tell you, I really wish I'm not wording this. I might not be wording this correctly, but if you put together what happened last year to this year, and then you see how the tables have turned, then you see who's passed away just within this 10 days after Purim, which was this year, 10 days after would have been 10 days, March 22nd, 2017. Okay, so I think you're going to get a better picture, because the 10 days after Purim were significant, because in the prophecy, it was 10 days after the Haman and the people that worked with him had fell, and that meaning they were hung by that very gallows that they created. If you know this prophecy, I really hope you take a second look at this, because some of these other preachers caught on to it. I caught on to it this last year. That's why I actually did this report. I cannot find a specific report, but it's very, very important. And see, this is why visions and dreams, if you record them, we could actually use them and say, wait a second, we had a dream about this a year ago, and something did happen, but it didn't happen last year. It happened this year. And that's why we were given that dream a year in advance. It was really interesting that Benjamin Nentayahu came when he did. No one could have foreseen what happened or what the outcome of the election was. That's why I know this is important. I know it's significant. It's obvious that when prophecy is being used as an indicator, like kind of like what happens when your car, it starts, those lights go on your dashboard. It's like an indicator. You have to bring it into the shop. It's kind of like what happened last year. There was a few indicators we were in trouble. And at that time, that was right as we were approaching getting into the elections, and people were starting to show up at these rallies. So no one knew last year that this would turn out the way it did. And here we are a year later. So I think you should really, if you're into the prophecy thing and you understand how I guess I don't want to say understand how prophecy works, but if this is the way it works, that we were given indicators last year that if we didn't get this right, something would have went wrong. But now these reports are saying something totally different. Like things are literally flipped, and it's going to continue to do that according to some of these other people that have been following prophecy, and some other Bible scholars have been stating it too. So I think it's pretty interesting. It's why we do it. It's kind of interesting. It's a study all by itself if you study that. And some of the things I did last year was all vision of other things future. And I think that when you think in terms of that the Revelation was written for, at that time, maybe John didn't know it, but a prophecy for what would be ahead. I mean, obviously way ahead, like 2,000 years ahead. And all of it was really apocalyptic news. The field report at the Third Watch Update is a part of the Amateur Radio Network.